We were headed out on vacation, and then the brakes just gave out. The car shot off the highway down the hill. My wife, my little girl, they died right there on the spot. It's a damn miracle I survived. Should have gotten the car checked before we left, but I didn't. Just like that, I killed my family. Everything I cared about. Ain't got no reason to keep living now. Sunlight poured through the big bay windows of our apartment. Sarah was at the kitchen island, a tower of blueberry pancakes teetering precariously, humming that silly tune she always did while cooking. Maisie, all tangled hair and giggles, was sprawled on the floor immersed in her drawing. A mountain of crayons and a crumpled-up masterpiece lay abandoned beside her. My phone buzzed. Again, Simpson from the Chicago office, probably about that delayed shipment. Figures. The one day I decide to disconnect, it's all going to blow up in my face. "Hey, big shot," Sarah teased with that smile that never failed to make my heart do a little flip. "Pancakes and artwork appreciation in 5. My career was on fire. Long hours, demanding clients, constant pressure. But Sarah, she never complained. "You're killing it, honey," she'd say, fixing me a drink when I walked in late, looking beat. Best part was it was paying off. This swanky apartment, Maisie's closet full of those frilly dresses she loved, trips whenever we could squeeze them in. Those were the rewards for the hustle. Maisie held up her newest drawing, a scribbly explosion of colors. "It's us, Daddy. On our trip to the mountains. Remember the funny deer? It ate your hat." My heart swelled. That trip. Roasting marshmallows over the fire, the hikes, Maisie shrieking with delight at every squirrel, and the deer that had playfully snatched my baseball cap. "Can't forget that, sweetheart." I crouched down, ruffling her hair. "You know what I love best about trips? Going on adventures with my 2 favorite girls." She threw her arms around my neck, that sticky, sweet toddler smell filling my nose. "I love going places with you, Mommy and Daddy, especially in the car. I get to see everything." Sarah leaned over and kissed us both. Pancakes on the table, explorers. Now, where should we go next? Maybe the beach. But, I started, my mind racing to calculate how much time a beach trip would take. Simpson wouldn't be happy with another delay. Maisie beamed at me. "Please, Daddy." Sarah smiled. "Just think about it, honey. The sand, the waves." I looked at their faces, their eyes sparkling with anticipation. My phone buzzed persistently, shattering the moment. One more time, I thought. Just one more time, then it goes back in my pocket. "Hello?" I snapped, my usual tone sharp and businesslike. "Finally!" a voice barked on the other end. It wasn't Simpson, it was Peterson, the head honcho. "Where the hell are you? We've got a crisis on the Westbridge deal." The rest of Peterson's words faded into the background. Crisis. The Westbridge deal was my baby. Months of careful negotiation now hanging in the balance. The Westbridge deal spiraled from bad to worse. Suppliers were in an uproar, investors were threatening to pull out, and Peterson paced my office, his normally immaculate suit a testament to the chaos. I am Jason, by the way, and this mess was mine to clean up. For hours I lost myself in the adrenaline. Negotiations with furious vendors, soothing promises to shareholders, a whirlwind of emails, calls, and revised contracts, a familiar dance, yet the stakes had never felt higher. This was it, the sink or swim moment. And somehow I swam. By the time the last email was fired off and the conference room fell silent, a miracle had occurred. Westbridge was back on track. Peterson, exhausted but beaming, clapped me on the shoulder. "You saved our bacon, kid," he declared, a rare note of genuine admiration in his voice. "Hell, you saved the quarter. Now listen, name your price. Bonus? Promotion? A week off in Tahiti? Anything? It's yours." Anything. My eyes flickered to my phone, buzzing with unread messages. A pang of guilt shot through me as I remembered Sarah at home, no doubt buzzing with excitement for our delayed family trip. As Peterson droned on, I discreetly checked the texts. Photos of pristine beaches started flooding in. "This one has the best tide pools. Maisie would love it. But what do you think? Or maybe here, softer sand but further drive? Your call, adventurer." I couldn't help but grin. Sarah was in full trip planning mode, her usual online research in overdrive. "A week off," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Start date, tomorrow. Peterson balked. Tomorrow, but we're just getting started. The follow-up. I trust my team, I cut him off, a fire I hadn't felt in weeks sparking in my gut. Besides, my wife's got vacation plans. A text flashed on my screen, a resort brochure with the caption, "This looks amazing. Please say yes?" He hesitated, then something in my face must have given him pause. All right, he relented. Enjoy the sand, but be back on your phone Monday 8 a.m. sharp. Got it. Monday seemed a lifetime away. I barely heard him as I rushed home, a surge of energy propelling me through the door. Sarah's eyes widened as I swept her and a squealing Maisie off their feet. Guess what? I grinned. Pack your bags, princesses. We're going on a trip. The planning was a whirlwind. Maisie insisted on packing every single stuffed animal. Sarah pored over destination guides and timelines, her spark reignited. By Wednesday afternoon, we were piling into the car, road trip snacks packed. Excitement thrumming through all three of us. As the city skyline faded into the rearview mirror, the promise of the open road seemed sweeter than ever before. For the first time in ages, it felt like nothing could stop us. For a few precious days, work and worry were distant echoes. There was just us, the endless ribbon of highway, and a whole lot of adventure on the horizon. Of course, in hindsight, that feeling of boundless freedom was the cruelest twist of fate, because just a few miles later, the sunshine felt too bright, the music too cheery for what lay ahead. We'd been winding through mountain roads, Maisie singing along to some absurd pop song Sarah had downloaded. Laughter had filled the car just moments before. Then a sharp bend came up too fast. I hit the brakes, and there was nothing, just a sickening feeling of helplessness as the pedal went straight to the floor. The rest unraveled in a blur. Sarah's scream, the world tilting sideways as we careened off the road, gravel spraying, the car bucking like a wild animal, and then a sickening thud as we hit the embankment, the world flipping upside down. Time warped. 1 second, metal crunched and glass shattered. The next, an eerie silence. Dust motes danced in the sunlight. My body ached, a dull roar in my ears. Then, Maisie's cry cut through the haze. "Mummy!" Her voice was tiny, terrified. "Mummy, where are you?" I turned, a scream building in my throat, then choked it back. There was no way to prepare her, no way to soften the blow. Sarah lay crumpled, eyes closed. Maisie, still strapped in, was miraculously whole, but her face, a mask of confusion and dawning horror. I don't recall the aftermath clearly. Scrambling hands pulling us out, sirens wailing, the cold comfort of a hospital room. I remember the doctor's voice, heavy with a regret he'd uttered too many times. The words "internal injuries didn't make it," echoing in a room far too small to hold my grief. I remember collapsing as they pried a sobbing Maisie from my grasp, her cries the only sound left in a world turned silent. Because after that, there was just a void. Where Sarah's laughter and Maisie's song should have been, there was only a silence that consumed everything. The sterile hospital room pulsed with muted beeps and hushed voices. I stared at the doctor, his words a jumble of syllables that my shattered mind refused to comprehend. Car accident, internal injuries, didn't make it. It was like a physical blow, forcing the air from my lungs, but even as my stomach lurched, some detached part of me registered that he was speaking of Sarah. Gone, just like that. Another figure pushed past him, a nurse, her eyes wide with a pity that pierced deeper than any pain. "Your daughter," she began, and the world tilted again. It took several agonizing beats for it to sink in. Daughter, Maisie. "Surgery, we tried, but—" Her voice trailed off, a cruel echo of the finality in the doctor's words. A scream tore itself out of me, a raw animal sound that seemed to come from someone else. Maisie, my bright-eyed, giggling girl, who drew pictures and loved road trips and filled my world with sticky-fingered chaos. No, it couldn't be. The room seemed to spin. I collapsed into a plastic chair, head cradled in my hands, sobs tearing through me. They were both gone, my girls. Moments ago, the world made sense. There was breakfast and songs in the car, and a lifetime of adventures to share. Now there was this echoing emptiness, this yawning chasm where my life used to be. Then a searing thought struck with a cruel, crushing clarity. I hadn't just lost them, I killed them. It was me who didn't check the brakes, obsessed with deals and promotions, while my real treasures sat waiting. This agony was of my own making. Hours passed in a blur of doctors, murmured condolences, and a grief so vast it eclipsed everything else. They spoke of autopsies and arrangements, details that slid off my consciousness. Nothing mattered anymore, the future a desolate wasteland without the two people who made it worth living. Days melted into a grotesque parody of living. The funeral was a macabre puppet show, a blur of faces offering condolences I couldn't hear. Hollow words like "time heals" and "stay strong" echoed against the relentless should have pounding in my skull. They lowered those impossibly small boxes into the ground, and with them went the last shred of purpose I'd ever known. Home became unbearable. Maisie's abandoned drawings mocked me from every corner, the silence a deafening accusation. I couldn't look at the untouched pancakes in the fridge, couldn't walk by the park we used to take her to. Each neglected corner held the weight of her absence. The high-powered Jason, the one who saved the deals, ceased to exist. I quit my job in a daze, the shocked pity in my colleagues' eyes a sharper cut than any anger. My career, those goals I'd chased so relentlessly, they crumbled to dust, worthless compared to Maisie's gleeful squeal at the sight of a squirrel. The bottle became my escape. Each swig burned a path through my guilt, a path that always ended in the same place. The sickening image of the car, of my family, of my catastrophic failure. Nights became a horror show. Sleep was a predator, cornering me with relentless, vivid nightmares. Sarah's scream, the sickening crunch of metal, Maisie's terrified cries echoing in the upside-down wreckage. When the cheap liquor couldn't shut out those screams, I wandered. City streets became my bedroom, park benches my refuge. Passers-by threw glances of disgust or pity. It didn't matter. I was already a ghost, haunting the places where they used to smile. There were nights when the darkness offered a different escape. I would stare up at the uncaring stars and imagine the car veering not off the road, but upwards, joining them in the inky oblivion. But even in my most desperate moments, a small, terrified voice would echo Maisie's cry, "Daddy, where are you?" The thought of her alone, lost without me, was an agony greater than any other. And so I survived. Barely. A shell of a man fueled by guilt and the bitterest kind of regret. I was a blight on the world, a walking corpse poisoning the sunlit streets I haunted. Sometimes I caught my reflection in shop windows and recoiled. The man staring back was monstrous, a grim testament to the destructive power of grief. Months bled into one another, a monotonous blur of despair. Sleep was the cruelest tormentor. Each night, my dreams transformed into twisted replays of that horrific day, always ending with the same gut-wrenching scene, Maisie trapped in the wreckage. Her eyes filled not with fear, but a strange, mournful acceptance. Then a change. She wasn't trapped anymore. My little girl would appear amidst the flickering dreamscape, not in terror, but with an ethereal glow. We'd play in meadows that didn't exist, build sandcastles on shores I'd never seen. Her laughter, once a soundtrack to my life, was now a haunting music box melody. "Come with me, Daddy," she'd whisper, her tiny hand outstretched. "It's beautiful here." The dreams became my waking obsession, their vividness, the warmth of her touch, the joyous light in her eyes. It began to blur the lines between nightmare and reality. Was it guilt-riddled madness, or was she reaching out from beyond the veil? One particularly bleak night, my dream Maisie led me through a shimmering forest. Birds sang a chorus too sweet to be real, and the sunlight was a balm to my wounded soul. She stopped by a crystal-clear stream, a playful grin on her face. "I miss you, Daddy," she said, her voice like a chime in the stillness. The longing in those words was a knife to my heart. "I miss you too, sweetheart," I whispered, tears choking my voice. "More than anything." She beckoned me closer. "Then come, be with me. We can be happy again." Despair washed over me in waves, the guilt morphing into a desperate yearning. This pain, this hollow existence, it was unbearable. With my real Maisie, there would be no more nightmares, no guilt, just her smile and the sweet sound of her voice. The stream beckoned, its shimmering surface promising a peace I could find nowhere else. With a tremor in my voice, I answered her. "Yes, my love, I'm coming." I reached for her hand and woke with a jolt, my heart pounding a frantic tattoo. The dream world shimmered in my mind's eye, agonizingly close, but doubt cut through the intoxicating vision. Was this truly Maisie, or had my grief twisted her memory, her sweetness, into a weapon against myself? The doubt was a sliver of sanity in a sea of despair, yet the allure of joining her, of silencing the guilt and ending the pain forever, was a current I could barely fight. The days blurred into nights, the nights into tormenting visions, and with each passing dream the world of the living became less and less real. Until finally one moonless night, the line between dream and despair shattered completely. In the depths of my tormented sleep, Maisie stood before me, her small hand beckoning, her smile achingly beautiful. This time I wouldn't hesitate. This time I would take her hand and step into the oblivion she promised. The icy wind whipped at my face, mirroring the storm raging inside me. Standing on the edge of the bridge, the churning river below looked welcoming, a dark promise of escape. Maisie's face, filled with a strange, sad smile, haunted my vision. "Come with me, Daddy," her voice echoed in my head. Suddenly, a gruff voice shattered the trance. "Hey, what are you doing?" I flinched, losing my balance on the slick metal. A scream tore from my throat as I tumbled towards the unforgiving darkness. A strong hand clamped onto my wrist, yanking me back with a jolt. I slammed onto the hard concrete, gasping for air, my heart hammering against my ribs. A man, weathered and kind-faced, knelt beside me. "Easy there," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "You all right?" Shame washed over me, a hot wave. I just... My voice cracked. He didn't pry. Instead, he helped me sit up, a concerned frown creasing his brow. We sat in silence for a moment, the city lights twinkling below. Finally, he spoke, his voice quiet. "Look, stranger, I don't know what's going on, but life throws punches. Everyone knows that. Lost my wife a few years back. Thought I couldn't go on either." He paused, his gaze steady. "But you gotta hold on. There's always something to fight for, even if you can't see it right now." His words were simple, but they hit me like a physical blow. Here he was, a man who'd clearly faced his own darkness, reaching out to a stranger on a bridge. And me? I was giving up on everything, on the chance that things might get better. The man didn't offer empty promises or easy solutions. He just sat there, a quiet beacon in the storm, reminding me I wasn't alone. Finally, he stood up, brushing dirt off his clothes. "You coming?" he asked, offering a hand. "There's a diner down the street with the best coffee in town. I could use some company, and you probably haven't eaten in a while." We sat in the greasy spoon, the silence heavy with the weight of my confession. Shame burned in my throat as I finished my story, the echo of Maisie's dream laughter twisting the knife in my gut. Pete, his face etched with the wisdom of hard times, took a thoughtful sip of coffee. Then he spoke, his voice low and raspy. "Listen," he said, his gaze steady on mine. "I lost my daughter too. In a fire, quick and painless. But for years after, I had this dream." He paused, his eyes distant with memory. "She'd be there, in a field of flowers, beckoning me to join her. Just like you said with your Maisie. It felt peaceful, like coming home." A flicker of hope sparked in my chest, quickly extinguished by a wave of doubt. "But you didn't join her," I croaked, the question a desperate plea. He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "No, son, I woke up. And you know what I realized?" He leaned forward, his eyes boring into mine. "I had it all wrong. My Emily, she wouldn't want me to crawl into that fire. She'd hate seeing me waste away, blaming myself." His words felt like a blow to the head, jolting me from the fog of despair. But her smile, in the dream," I stammered, clinging to the memory. Maybe, Pete said softly, it wasn't a smile for you to join her, but for you to finally let go, to stop being a ghost yourself. You're Maisie. She wants you to live, son, not to die. A sob tore from my throat. The image of Maisie, her face etched with sadness, not joy, flooded my mind. Shame washed over me, a tidal wave of self-loathing. Pete was right. I'd been living a life of the dead, a hollow shell consumed by blame. She wants you to find your purpose again, Pete continued, his voice gentle. Maybe you have something left to do in this world, something good. Maybe saving someone else from the darkness you're in now. His words struck a chord deep within me. Maybe there was a way to honor Maisie, not by joining her, but by living a life that mattered, a life that wouldn't be consumed by regret, a life that could maybe, just maybe, help someone else find their way back from the brink. Looking at Pete, a glimmer of hope flickered in my eyes. You think so? Pete smiled, a genuine warmth radiating from him. I know so. Now, you finish your coffee and come on. We're going to get you back on your feet, one step at a time. The road ahead was shrouded in mist, but for the first time in months, I wasn't facing it alone. The darkness still lingered, but a spark of purpose, a whisper of a new mission had ignited within me. Maybe, just maybe, there was still a reason to live. Days turned into weeks, and with Pete's rough but genuine guidance, I began to stumble back towards some semblance of life. He hired me on at his small auto repair shop. The work was hard, my hands blistered, but the honest sweat felt cleansing. Pete had a gruff exterior, but beneath his worn flannel shirts beat a heart of gold. He taught me not only about engines and transmissions, but about grit and resilience. The routine, the camaraderie of the greasy, loud shop started to pull me back from the abyss. After a few months, I was even smiling again, rough jokes tossed across the garage like wrenches. One day, Pete clapped me on the shoulder, the look in his eyes a mix of relief and pride. You're getting your spark back, kid. Reckon you won't be needing that diner number of mine anymore soon. He was mostly right. There were still nights when the darkness crept in, when Maisie and Sarah's faces would flicker in my mind's eye. But now, I knew how to fight back. I'd walk the streets, offering a smile or some spare change to those who mirrored my own lost soul, or I'd sit by the river and simply breathe, letting the world go on without swallowing me whole. The shop, under my increasing involvement, began to thrive. Pete, bless the man, saw the businessman in me still, the one I thought was buried with my family. I streamlined processes, struck deals for better parts. Soon we weren't just fixing old clunkers, we were getting some high-end clients, their shiny cars a stark contrast to our grease-stained world. However, getting back behind the wheel wasn't easy. Every time I climbed into the driver's seat, a phantom echo of the crash would ripple through me. My hands would shake, the familiar scent of gasoline mixed with a choking fear. Pete sensed my struggle. He taught me breathing exercises, made me start with short strolls through the quiet neighborhood streets. It was slow, but the panic attack started to subside, replaced by a cautious determination. Now, Pete announced one day, you're going to make the runs. I didn't need to ask what he meant. Part suppliers, deals in nearby towns. It all involved getting back on the road. The first few trips were a haze of white-knuckled driving and forced calm. But as the miles passed, as I focused on the thrum of the engine instead of the terror in my chest, a change happened. The open road wasn't a death sentence anymore. It was a tool, a way to take charge of the narrative. Business trips became routine. Each successful return chipped away at the trauma. I'd scout for parts, haggle with junkyard owners, shake hands with mechanics who saw a kindred spirit in my grease-stained clothes. It wasn't the life I'd imagined, but it was honest, it was purposeful, and most importantly, it was mine to rebuild. Maisie would have loved the adventure, and Sarah, she'd respect the hustle. The towns beyond unfolded before me, each one a potential deal, a chance to expand our reach. The weight of the past was still there, a dull ache in my heart. But it was no longer the driving force, replaced by a sense of quiet determination. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving 1 mile at a time. The rhythmic rumble of the highway faded into the background as I pulled into a dusty diner in a forgotten corner of the state. The worn leather of the booth felt strangely comforting as I flipped through a menu stained with years of grease and dreams. Taking a deep breath, I ordered a burger, the familiarity of a classic meal a grounding force in my unfamiliar life. As I waited, my gaze drifted out the greasy window, drawn to a young girl huddled against the building across the street. She couldn't be much older than 15, her clothes threadbare and her posture a symphony of exhaustion. In her hand she clutched something tightly, the meagerness of her belongings, an accusation against the world. A jolt ripped through me. The girl's hair, the way the sunlight caught the same golden glint I remembered. It was like looking into a warped mirror, a reflection of Maisie I shouldn't be able to see. I slammed my menu shut, the clatter drawing a look from the waitress refilling coffee at a nearby booth. "You all right there, honey?" she drawled, a friendly smile etched into the lines on her face. "That girl outside," I stammered, my voice thick with a mix of disbelief and a nameless dread. "Do you see her?" The waitress followed my gaze, her smile turning neutral. "Yeah, that's Mary. Beggar kid, always hanging around. You shouldn't encourage folks like that." Anger flared in my chest, a fierce protectiveness I hadn't felt in years. But she looks—" The words wouldn't form. Maisie. Here. Impossible. Yet the resemblance was undeniable. The waitress chuckled, a harsh sound that scraped against my already frayed nerves. "Rough week, huh? Happens to the best of us. You missing someone special, maybe?" I swallowed, the image of my smiling daughter a bittersweet punch in the gut. "No," I managed, my voice barely a whisper. But the lie felt heavy on my tongue. I couldn't just ignore her. Pushing myself out of the booth, I ignored the waitress's confused stare and headed for the door. The young girl flinched at my approach, her wary gaze mirroring the fear I'd seen 1,000 times in the eyes of lost animals. The object clutched in her hand remained hidden, but I could see the telltale outline, a swaddled shape, small and fragile. "Hey," I said, my voice gentle. "Are you all right?" The girl didn't answer, her eyes locked on a point somewhere over my shoulder. Mustering up my courage, I reached into my pocket and pulled out a crisp $20 bill. "Here," I said, extending it towards her. "Get yourself something to eat." The girl's gaze flickered to the money, then back to me. Tentatively, she reached out and took it, her touch light and cold. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely a rasp. Before I could say anything else, she turned and started to walk away. But I couldn't let her go. "Wait," I blurted out. The girl spun around, suspicion clouding her already wary eyes. "What is it?" I took a deep breath. "Have you eaten today?" The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken concern. A flicker of defiance crossed the girl's face, then a reluctant shake of her head. "Why don't you join me?" I gestured back towards the diner. "Lunch is on me." The girl hesitated, her gaze darting between me and the bundle in her arms. Finally, with a small nod, she followed me back into the diner. The greasy aroma hit me as I held the door open for the girl. Inside, the air buzzed with the low hum of conversation and the clatter of cutlery. She hesitated for a moment, then slipped past me, clutching the bundle in her arms closer. I found a booth in the back corner, away from the curious stares. As she settled into the worn red vinyl, a sliver of the hidden object peeked out, a tiny hand wrapped in a threadbare blanket. My heart lurched. It was a baby. A million questions swirled in my head. This girl couldn't be Maisie, not grown up. Maisie would be around 7 now, a little ray of sunshine with a laugh that could melt glaciers. This girl, with her haunted eyes and weary posture, looked older than her 15 years. And the baby, what did this mean? Before I could voice any of the questions, the waitress clattered down 2 menus, a forced smile plastered on her face. I ordered a burger and fries, stealing a glance at the girl. She stared at the menu, her brow furrowed, but made no move to order. "You'll want the cheeseburger special, honey," the waitress chirped, her gaze lingering on the bundle the girl held protectively. "Comes with a drink and a slice of pie." The girl glanced up, a flicker of defiance in her eyes. "I'm not hungry," she mumbled. My stomach growled, a traitor in a tense situation. "Don't mind her," I said to the waitress, forcing a smile. "She'll change her mind. Make it 2 cheeseburger specials and a chocolate shake for the little one." The waitress raised an eyebrow but scribbled down the order with a sigh. As she walked away, I took a deep breath. "Look," I said gently, "you seem like you could use a friend. My name's Jason. What's yours?" The girl hesitated for a long moment, then mumbled, "Mary." "Mary?" I repeated, trying to keep my voice calm. "What's going on? You shouldn't be out here alone with a baby." Mary's eyes welled up, her defiance melting away into a flood of unshed tears. Taking a shaky breath, she poured out her story. Getting pregnant at 14, the fear and shame, stealing $5,000 from her father to run away. The fantasy of a new life, a clean slate, crumbling as the money dwindled faster than she imagined. She couldn't go back. She was terrified of her father's anger, the disappointment in her mother's eyes. Here, in this dusty, forgotten town, she was invisible, another face lost in the crowd. Begging for scraps was the only way she knew to survive, to care for the tiny life depending on her. My heart ached for her. This wasn't just a resemblance to Maisie, it was a mirror reflecting the vulnerability of a young girl thrust into a harsh world. "Here," I said, pulling out my phone, "maybe let's just call your parents. Let them know you're okay. I'll talk to them first, explain the situation, then I can give you the phone if you want." Mary flinched, her eyes wide with fear. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "They wouldn't want me back. I know it." A thought struck me. "What about your mom?" I asked softly. "I bet she misses you." Mary's gaze softened, and a single tear rolled down her cheek. After a long pause, she whispered her mom's phone number. I dialed the number, my own heart pounding in my chest. A woman's voice, thick with worry, answered. I explained who I was, how I'd found Mary, and that she was okay. There was a gasp on the other end, then sobs. "My baby," the woman cried, her voice catching. "Is she... Please tell me she wants to talk to me." A lump formed in my throat. Mrs. She sobbed out her last name. "I'm going to pass the phone to Mary now. She's a bit scared, but please, just let her know you love her and that you want her home." I nudged the phone towards Mary. She took it with a trembling hand, her eyes wide, a mix of fear and longing flooding her face. The silence was deafening, punctuated only by Mary's quiet sobs and the muffled voice of her mother. It was a conversation I hadn't meant to hear, but one filled with raw, aching love. Tears streamed down Mary's face as she cradled the phone, listening to her mother's choked sobs and whispered apologies. The raw emotion in their conversation was a stark contrast to the emptiness that had filled Mary's days. Finally, with a shaky breath, she managed a small, "I love you, Mum." It was barely a whisper, but in that moment, a bridge began to rebuild. After they hung up, Mary looked at me, a fragile hope flickering in her eyes. We finished our lunch in a heavy silence, punctuated only by the clinking of silverware and the occasional choked sob from Mary. When it was time to go, I knew what I had to do. At the bus station, I purchased a ticket for Mary and her baby to her hometown. As I handed it to her, along with a $100 bill tucked discreetly into her palm, I said, "Don't think of this as a handout, Mary. Think of it as a loan for a fresh start. You got this." Mary's eyes welled up again. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You don't know what this means to me." There were no guarantees, no happily ever after pronouncements. All I could do was offer a hand up, a flicker of hope in the darkness. With a final hug, I watched Mary and her baby board the bus, a small family embarking on a journey home. A few hours later, my phone buzzed. It was a text message from an unknown number, a simple line filled with immense gratitude. "Thank you, Jason. You saved my daughter's life. Mary's mom." A wave of relief washed over me, warm and unexpected. I saved a life. Maybe not in the grand, heroic sense, but in a way that mattered. That night, I slept a little easier, the weight on my chest lighter than it had been in months. Months passed, the crisp autumn air turning into the crisp bite of winter. Christmas lights twinkled in shop windows, casting a warm glow on the bustling streets. One morning, a card arrived in the mail. The simple drawing of a child's hand holding a heart on the front hinted at the sender. Inside, a heartfelt message scrawled in a young girl's handwriting thanked me 1,000,000 times over, crediting me with saving her and her baby. Later that day, another message arrived, this one a text. It was from Mary's mom. "Merry Christmas, Jason," it read. "Thank you for giving us back our daughter and our granddaughter. We'll never forget your kindness." A single tear rolled down my cheek, but this time it wasn't a tear of grief. It was a tear of hope, a bittersweet reminder that even in the darkest of times, kindness could bloom, and sometimes the smallest acts could have the most profound impact. Maybe, just maybe, this Christmas, a family was finally whole again, and that in itself was the greatest gift of all. February arrived, a bleak month cloaked in the chill of winter's waning grip. One morning my phone buzzed with a text, the sender's name unfamiliar. It was Mary. Her words were a punch to the gut. "Dad passed away in a car accident. I don't know what to do." A wave of helplessness washed over me. I wanted to be there, to offer comfort and support, but I was tied to Pete's shop. He was swamped with a rush job, and I couldn't leave him hanging. Instead, I sent back a torrent of messages, filled with condolences and promises to help in any way I could. The following weeks were a blur of texts exchanged with Mary. She poured out her grief, her fear for the future, her unwavering determination to build a new life for herself and her child. Her mother, too, reached out, her words filled with a gratitude that transcended mere words. One text from Mary stood out. "I decided to go to college," she wrote. "Not a doctor. Maybe that was a teenage dream. But I can be a nurse. Mom's been so supportive, helping me with the baby and everything." Another text followed a few days later. "Guess what? I got accepted. I'm coming to your city to start school. Mom and the baby are coming too. Would you like to meet up?" A thrill shot through me. The chance to see Mary again, to witness the new life she was building, filled me with a joy tinged with a different kind of ache. We arranged to meet at a small cafe I frequented, a place with warm lighting and a friendly atmosphere. As I waited, anticipation bubbled in my chest. Then I saw them. Mary, a touch older but with a resolute glint in her eyes, walked in first. Behind her, a woman I didn't recognize. And then, the breath caught in my throat. The woman was a mirror image of Sarah, the same warm brown hair, the same gentle curve to her cheekbones. It felt like a cruel joke, a mirage playing tricks on my grief-stricken mind. It couldn't be real, and yet it was undeniably undeniable. As they approached my table, a tremor ran through me. There were introductions to make, smiles to exchange, but all I could see was the ghost of Sarah standing right there in front of me. A wave of grief crashed over me, a tidal force that threatened to pull me under. My words caught in my throat. Instead, I stood up and, without thinking, embraced all three of them. Tears poured down my cheeks, sobs racking my body. I couldn't hold back the flood of emotions. The warmth of bodies surrounding me, the murmur of their voices. It was all too much. Mary and her mother seemed surprised, unsure of how to react. Through my tears, I managed to croak, "I'm sorry, it's just—" But there was no way to explain the inexplicable. Slowly, with gentle hands, they guided me back to my seat. I wiped my face, a wave of embarrassment washing over me. This was supposed to be a happy reunion, a celebration of Mary's success. Instead, I was overwhelmed, my grief bubbling to the surface in the most unexpected of ways. I tried hard to keep calm, forcing a smile as I greeted Mary and her mother. We exchanged hugs, the warmth a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside me. Mary, radiant with newfound hope, chattered excitedly about her upcoming studies. Her mother, beaming with pride, shared stories of their journey. For a few precious hours, we celebrated Mary's new beginnings, the unspoken grief, a weight I somehow managed to bear. As they said their goodbyes, the weight returned, crushing. That evening, I texted Mary's mother, apologizing profusely for my breakdown at the cafe. Her response surprised me. "Don't worry about it, Jason," she wrote. "It's clear you care deeply for Mary. And most importantly, I'm just so grateful to finally meet you, the man who saved my daughter and granddaughter." Those words ignited a spark within me. We started exchanging texts, simple messages at first, then longer conversations that spilled into the night. There was a kindness in her words, a warmth that resonated with a lonely part of me. Soon I found myself looking forward to our daily exchanges, her messages becoming a highlight of my day. One evening she mentioned visiting Mary for the weekend. "Would you like to meet up?" she texted casually. My heart stuttered. This wasn't just friendly anymore. Here was a chance, a possibility I hadn't dared to consider. We met at the same cafe, a sense of nervous anticipation thrumming in the air. This time, it was just the two of us. She'd left the baby with Mary, granting us a stolen moment. We talked for hours, about everything and nothing, the conversation flowing effortlessly. It felt like a first date, a tentative exploration of a connection that went deeper than shared grief. Finally, I gathered my courage. Taking a deep breath, I poured out my heart, telling her about Sarah, the life we'd built, the gaping hole her absence left behind. She listened intently, her eyes reflecting a quiet empathy. When I finished, a heavy silence settled. "I'm so sorry, Jason," she said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "There are no words for such a loss. But please know, if there's anything I can do, anything at all." Her voice trailed off. I reached across the table, taking her hand in mine. The warmth of her touch sent a shiver down my spine. "Maybe," I said, my voice rough. "Maybe there is. Maybe we can help each other heal." A flicker of hope danced in her eyes, mirroring the one igniting within me. The path ahead was uncertain, paved with grief and the tentative steps towards something new. But in that shared moment, under the warm glow of the cafe lights, a seed of possibility had been sown. Days turned into weeks, then months filled with shared coffee breaks, long walks along the waterfront, and late-night texts filled with laughter and the cautious exploration of new beginnings. With Mary's mother, I found a confidant, a kindred spirit who understood the strange symphony of grief, guilt, and the yearning for human connection. It was not easy. The weight of the past lingered, a constant companion at quiet dinners and during the lonely hours of the night. But with each shared smile, each supportive word, a lightness returned to my step, a flicker of hope that I thought forever extinguished. This was not about replacing Sarah. It was about finding a way to honor her memory by embracing life and all its unexpected twists of fate. One sunny afternoon, walking hand in hand with Mary's mother, her name was Emily, under a canopy of blossoming trees, I knew. This was more than a second chance. It was a testament to the enduring power of kindness and the human ability to rebuild from the ashes of loss. "Emily," I began, my voice trembling slightly, "I know this is sudden, or maybe it isn't, but I think—" She turned to me, her eyes wide with surprise, a mix of hope and uncertainty. I think," I stumbled, finding my courage, "I think I'm falling in love with you." A smile bloomed on her face, a warmth radiating from her that rivaled the afternoon sun. "Oh, Jason," she whispered, her eyes shimmering. "I think I am too." The day we got married was small and intimate. Mary, beaming as maid of honor, stood beside us, our connection now twofold. Her growing child, a symbol of new life, gurgled happily, oblivious to the intertwining threads of fate that had brought us together. Pete, his gruff exterior melted away, raised a toast. "Never thought I'd see you smile like this again, son. Here's to love, found in the most unexpected places." The weight on my heart didn't entirely disappear, but it lessened. Each day with Emily was a reminder that life wasn't just about enduring, but about finding sparks of joy amidst the shadows. Our love story was born from tragedy and kindness, a testament to the unwavering ability of the human heart to heal, even in the face of unfathomable loss. As the years unfolded, our family grew, a messy, joyous tapestry woven from threads of grief and newfound hope. Sometimes, in the quiet of the night, I'd still dream of Maisie, her smile untouched by time. Her memory was a bittersweet ache, a reminder of all I'd lost but never forgotten. But now those dreams were accompanied by new ones: Emily's laughter, Mary's determined spirit, and the bright promise etched in the eyes of our children. Life had played a cruel hand, but it had also offered an unexpected gift. And in the warm embrace of a new family, built on shared love and the resilience born from shared pain, I found my way back to a kind of happiness I never thought possible.
If this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing, hitting the like button, and leaving a comment to show your support. Your engagement helps tremendously and encourages more stories like this one. Thank you for being a part of this journey.